Now, there's a new sheriff in town. It's the biggest defection story Reform has ever had. That's according to his own media memo leaked to the papers over the weekend. But look, there is no doubt that Robert Jenrick's decision to leave the Conservative Party and to join Reform is a massive moment. It sent shockwaves through Westminster when it hit the news on Thursday, and it hasn't stopped doing so since. Robert Jenrick says Britain is broken, only a revolution can fix it, a revolution led by Reform. Let's find out more. I'm pleased to say joins us.
Good morning. Nice to be here.
Morning, Sheriff. You say you defected to Reform last week, and this media memo was leaked over the weekend. There's a new sheriff in town. This is the biggest defection story Reform has ever had, and likely ever will be. I mean, did you cringe a little bit when you saw that in print?
Look, this was written by some people who work for me. They write stuff for me all the time. Sometimes I read them, sometimes I don't. I think they're having a little bit of fun. It was nicked by somebody who works for Kemi. Apparently that's perfectly acceptable these days in politics. But the most important thing is that I believe very strongly that the only way we're going to fix this country is if we have real change. And that's only going to happen if we rally behind Reform now and make sure that they form the next government. I do believe Britain is broken. I think it pains me to say that. That's the view that most people in the country feel. Certainly my constituents up in Newark feel that life is tough at the moment. The bills are rising, wages are stagnating, the town centres are down on their luck. You know, immigration continues to be a massive challenge, NHS waiting lists. Things are not working in this country as they need to be. The Conservative Party, I'm afraid to say, does not share that. Kemi Badenoch has said since my defection that she thinks Britain isn't broken. I find that astonishing. If you share my view that the country needs real change, we've got to turn this around, and we can do, then the only option to get rid of the Labour government, to fix the country, is to rally behind Nigel and rally behind Reform. You
talked there about rallying behind Nigel. I mean, he's always struck me as the kind of guy who likes to be the boss. So, like, are you the sheriff and he's the king? Is this how the relationship works?
Look, one of the things I thought I was getting away from by joining Reform is all this leadership.
That was in the memo as well. You reading it? You must have read this one.
That was in the. I think that note did say, and it is my view that Nigel's a very strong leader. He is the leader of this party. There is no question of that whatsoever. And if your country's in a mess, actually, you want a strong leader. You want somebody who is charismatic, is capable of making decisions, and above all, has been consistent on the big challenges facing the country. And having watched prime ministers up front, almost all have been, frankly, in different ways, a big disappointment, from Keir Starmer to the Tory prime ministers that I knew. The most important quality of all is consistency. And Nigel, on immigration, on the economy, on net zero, has been very consistent, not just for the last few years, but on some of those issues for my whole adult lifetime. And that's why I think he is obviously the most suited person for a time of great change where you want someone who can turn the country around. OK, I mean, you mentioned there about how every Conservative Party Prime Minister you've been up close with has been a disappointment. I mean, you've been pretty unrelenting towards some of your former colleagues, including Liz Truss. You actually say she should be kicked out of the party. Yes. Why is that? Look, if I'd been leader of the Conservative Party, and that's obviously ancient history now, I would have chucked Liz Truss out of the party. Because the mini-budget was careless, it was cack-handed, it did cause, in the moment, real harm to people. You know, people's house sales fell through, they're worried about their mortgages, investments, their pensions. That's wrong. You know, that is not somebody who should be a member of your political party if you want to be a serious political party. And the point I was making is, has the Conservative Party changed? I don't believe it has. This is one of the things that weighed on my mind as to whether I should stick with it or I should move to Reform. So that's why it was nothing to do with the fact that you didn't think you'd be able to take Kemi Badenoch for the leadership, because that was the other thing that a lot of people were saying, oh, it's a bit of a coincidence that as soon as her poll ratings start to get better, well, that isn't that's the case, when you actually, because I've been considering this for a very long time. But on this point, if the party has really changed, why wouldn't you kick Liz Truss out? You know, I've told Kemi to do that. She chose not to do it, and it speaks to a broader truth. The party... You just to pick up on that, you told Kemi Badenoch... Yeah, that was my advice, yeah. When was that? Multiple times when it's been discussed. The point is this. Can the British public trust the Conservative Party again, despite everything that went wrong when it was in office? If it hasn't changed, hasn't learnt its mistakes, isn't sorry for its mistakes, it's still got the cast of characters who made those mistakes at the helm. The arsonists are still there. Why would anyone trust them once again? And I concluded it's never going to change, certainly not in the years ahead. And so you've got to strike out and do something different, and reform is the way to do that.
It's interesting you're talking there about feeling the weight of the Conservative Party's mistakes. And, Nigel Farage, while sat next to you, said that reform was accepting people, in his words, who are apologetic, indeed ashamed of what they've done in the past. Are you personally ashamed of your own record in politics?
Well, I don't think anybody in the Conservative Party has or had been more open about the mistakes than me. At the end of the day, I resigned from the last Conservative cabinet.
But what about your own mistakes? Because it's easy to say, oh, it was all other people's faults. But what about your own mistakes?
Well,
you were a minister, weren't you? You had power, you were in positions of responsibility.
There were things I got right. There were things I got wrong. On the most important issue that I was responsible for, on immigration, I fought very, very hard and ultimately persuaded Rishi Sunak to bring in the changes on legal migration, which we're now seeing the benefits of because it's falling rapidly. They will end up with net zero immigration as a result of those changes.
Although at the same time...
when I wasn't able to bring about the change that I wanted to see on illegal migration, the small boats, I resigned.
So just on the legal migration, because you were an immigration minister from October 2022 until December 2023, and in the year ending June 2023, net migration was 906,000, the highest ever. I mean, that was on your
No, it's not. That's not. With all due respect, that's a kind of clownish argument. The stats are all backdated. So I arrived in the Home Office and the whole thing was a complete bin fire. I then spent a year with Suella Braverman trying to persuade Rishi Sunak to make the changes that were needed. Suella managed to secure some in the spring, and then the week that I resigned, mainly because I literally walked into Rishi Sunak's office and said, I'm going to resign unless you do this, he agreed to the changes we announced. They then had to come into force. By the time they had come into force, a year later, they started to have a massive impact. And that's what we're seeing now. So my record there, I'm very proud of.
What did you get wrong then? You said that you got some things wrong. What did you get wrong?
Look, the two big things that I did when I was in government were, one, immigration, and the second, on housing. I wanted to get more young people onto the housing ladder. Actually, we got starts up to the highest level since the 80s. But that wasn't enough.
On the starts,
that was not enough.
Can I ask you on this figure? Because I'm a bit confused about this figure. Are you just talking about starts for young people?
No, all houses.
Because the Office for National Statistics figures for starter builds and all dwelling in England, my reading is 2021 was 177,160, 2022 was 182,070, which isn't as high as 2007. I mean, maybe you're 19, which means it would be the highest in your lifetime, but I'm very confused on...
2019, when I was Housing Secretary, was the highest since the mid-1980s. We then had COVID, obviously it fell. It rebounded very fast after COVID. So that period, when I was the Housing Secretary, and there's independent research, like the charity, the think tank Onward has said this,
was higher than the 2007 number, 183,000.
Was the period when there were the most planning approvals and starts of the modern era. But look, was it enough, Sophie? No, of course it wasn't enough. And I felt very disappointed that we didn't manage to do more. That was a classic example where the Tory party promised big, but at the end of the day, it put interests above actually getting things done. I think that record in office was poor.
So what did you...
And we can't allow that to happen.
So that that's the thing that you say that you got wrong then? You wanted to go further on housing?
I would definitely want to go on housing. And on immigration, of course we needed to go further than that. I mean, the fact that the government was not willing to agree that we hived out all of the merry-go-round of legal claims so that we could detain and deport people who came on small boats was a total disgrace. Now that's widely accepted by people. The Tory party's position is that we leave the ECHR, which is the argument, essentially, that I made in the winter of 2023. But back in the day, no one was willing to accept it. And I don't believe that the same people have suddenly had a Damascene conversion a year later and are now all willing to do something that they were absolutely dead against back then.
Finally, because I know that we are out of time, but there's a big press conference from Keir Starmer today, and it is a difficult moment for him, right? He has to, I guess, pick a side, because Donald Trump has threatened Greenland, he's threatened tariffs on people who want to try and stop him. How should the Prime Minister play this?
Well, it's a tricky diplomatic situation, but you've got to be very clear that this is completely wrong. It's totally unacceptable to use bully boy tactics and tariff wars to try to achieve this goal. when you're dealing with some of your closest and most long-standing allies. Is there a serious issue at the heart of it? Yes, absolutely. In the decades ahead, the rest of our lifetimes, we cannot allow China and our adversaries to gain ground in a very strategically important part of the world, Greenland and what's known as the High North. With changing climates, there'll be new waterways and channels opening up, routes through that. It's going to become one of the most contested and strategically important parts of the world. So not just the security of the United States, but that of our own country is at stake here. But that can be secured working diplomatically. In fact, there are already existing arrangements. The United States has a treaty with Denmark and Greenland, which would allow it to put more security forces, more troops, more equipment in Greenland than it has today. It had 15,000 troops in the Cold War. Today, it's got a fraction of that. So hopefully, the Prime Minister will be able to get round the table, use our country's good relationship with the United States to find a diplomatic solution to this that protects our security interests, but also doesn't compromise NATO.
Robert Jenrick, thank you very much indeed. Robert Jenrick, their newly of reform.